Okay, so we are back and we are going to be now processing all of the data that we've passed through here. So what do we want to do? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to iterate through these values and check the values that I explicitly want the user to have typed. So all of them are required except last name. So if, for example, the user fills out all the data except last name, then that's acceptable. However, if they omit something like the password again or first name, or any of these starred, even if they then enter last name, we want to show them an error message. So we need to think of a clever way of doing this. So I'm going to create an array which is going to hold all of the field names that are required, and this is just going to save us from having a massive if statement. We could, for example, say if $_post first name, or in fact we would have to do empty, and then empty again for every single field that we want. And that's really you know, it's first of all it's bad practice, second of all it takes a long time and it's harder to maintain. So I'm going to create an array, and this is going to store the required fields. So I'm just going to call this array required fields. So within this array, and this, by the way, is just created a new array, relatively straightforward, is going to hold just the names here, username, password, password underscore, again, of the required fields. So let's go ahead and do that now. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are required. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Simple. So the first one is username, and then it's password, and then it's password again, and then it is first name and email. So you can already see that if I wanted to then include, say, gender as a required field, I would just go ahead and add it in here. Obviously we're not using that yet. Okay, so now this post data here contains all of the fields that we have submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and print our $_post, and we'll just see how that looks. In fact, I'm going to echo, I'm going to place some pre-tags around this, just to format it. You'll see in a moment how this looks. So stick a true parameter in there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click register. You can see we've got this array now, and it's showing us the visual representation of the array. We've got username, password, password again, first name, last name, email, and they're all empty. If I go ahead and type in Alex, let me just get rid of that from earlier on in the tutorial, because that's very annoying, and that as well. So if I go ahead and type in Alex here and click register, we now got this value here. So what we can do is we can loop through this post array here, and we can check if the field is within this field. So let's go ahead and do that. So for each $_post as key value. Now what is this doing? Well, it's iterating through our post data, so all of the fields that we saw just here, it's looping through each one, and we're going to do a check on each one. And because we're using the same names here as we've defined in our array, we can use the inArray function to detect whether the field that's empty or not is within this array. So if a field is empty and it is in this array, it means it's required, so we can error. So remember from earlier on in the series, we had within our init thing here, this errors array that we just declared at the top because we assumed we're going to be using it in many places. Well, this we're going to fill up with errors. So if you're unsure on that, skip back to the error outputting part of the tutorial to get to grips with that. So for every value, I'm just going to go ahead and echo key, and this is just going to demonstrate a space after that. This is just going to demonstrate that when we refresh, we get username, password, password again, first name, so we can compare these values. So let's go ahead and do that. We want to say if something, and what's that something? Well, if empty if empty value, so the value of each field here, if it's empty, and in array equals true. Now in array what? Well, we need to specify a value that's in the array, and we need to specify the array itself. Now the array itself is the post array, $_post array, and the value here is key. So we're saying if the particular value that we've currently looped through is empty, and the field name of this value is in this, sorry, I've done this completely wrong, required fields, and if the key for here, so i.e. username, password again, is in this required fields array, i.e. does it equal true, then we have hit a problem because we have an empty value that's been defined explicitly as a required field. So now what do we do? Well, we need to append to our errors array, as we've already done, and I'm just going to say fields marked with an asterisk are required. And then what I'm going to do is, we've got a problem here because we might have more than one field that is that has been found to not contain any data. So we actually need to break out of this loop, this for each loop here. So break one will just say we'll come out of this loop here, and that's it, continue with the execution. So what we'll do now is we'll do as we did in the error reporting tutorial, and we'll just print our errors. Now let's go ahead and just refresh that. We've got an empty array here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in Alex. I'm going to type in a password. Type in another part of the password, well, the repeated password. I am not going to enter a last name, but I'm going to enter my email address. I'm going to click register. Nothing happens, i.e. no data is in this array. It means we've entered all the required fields. Now if I click register, it says fields marked, well, with no data in, it says fields marked with an asterisk are required. So we now know that this works. Again, if I type in data here, but not email, we get the same error message here because it's looping through each one, checking if it's in that required fields array, and then if not, appending to the errors, breaking out of that loop because we don't need to iterate each one. Essentially what this means is if one error is found, i.e. if one of the fields doesn't exist, then we can't do anything else, so just break out. Okay, so that's it for that. We want to go on now to do some more specific validation, that is to check if the user exists, the password is long enough in length, little things like that we don't necessarily have to do, like the password length, but are nice to do. So let's go ahead and do this now then. So I'm going to say first of all, if empty errors is equal to true. And why am I doing this? Well, if this error has occurred, there's no point checking, there's no point continuing to check, essentially because then you might have not entered a password first time, but you might have entered a repeat password for some reason. In that case, if we were validating that password, the first password and the repeated password are equal to each other, they wouldn't be equal. So we would output, the first error we would output is fields marked with an asterisk are required, and then we would output the passwords do not match. There's no point. If we haven't entered all fields, we don't validate at all. We're asking the user to validate or enter all their data. Let's go ahead and continue. Well, we need to now check if this user already exists. We don't want to allow a user to register if the username already exists. So if you remember, within core functions user, we already created this user exists function, and this will just return true or false. Let me just scroll along. True or false. If the user exists, it returns true. If the user doesn't exist, it returns false, funnily enough. So let's go ahead and create an if statement to check this. And by the way, all of these if statements are going to be separate from each other. We're not going to use chaining and say else if something. The reason being is that we want to, let's say the username exists and the passwords don't match, we want to append to this errors array, and we want a list of errors. We don't just want one error after another, because that's going to annoy the user. They want all errors, they can correct all of the errors, then submit the form properly. So if user exists, $_post username. So now we're passing through the posted username from our post array, and if the user exists is equal to true. So if this function returns true, then we don't want to register the user, we want to return an error. So we're going to say sorry, the username, and then a space, and then I'm going to do a single quote, escape that, concatenate on the username, and then again concatenate on a single quote, escape that, is already taken. Okay, so we're not doing anything to this. We're not sanitizing it. So we'll see a problem with this in just a moment. So let me just go ahead and refresh this. I'm going to go ahead and type in Alex here. Click register. Fields marked with an asterisk are required. That proves my point earlier that we're checking that all fields are required before we validate all of the fields as a whole. So I'll just go ahead and type in any random information in here. Click register. Sorry, the username Alex in single quotes. Remember, we escaped them because we're using quotes on either side. Is already taken. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and type in body bg color equals black. Obviously this is a ridiculous way to set a background color in a document. We would use CSS, but I'm just using this as an example. Type in Alex and my email address. Now I'm going to click register. Oh, okay. Oh, of course, because that username already exists. It doesn't exist. The point I'm trying to get across is let's just go and echo out $_post email, and I'll show you just a problem that we're having, and we'll do this in a moment. So Alex, password, first name, and email. Now I'm going to do body bg color equals hash not. And you'll probably think I'm absolutely mad. Why am I doing this? Well, when I click register, oh my god. Okay, so let's just try this again. Pass Alex. Try and demonstrate a simple example. Right, so now register, and nothing's happened. Odd. Okay, let's just leave that for now. Essentially, the point I was getting across is that we're not sanitizing this data before we're outputting it to the user. And the problem with that is that we might be outputting HTML content, anything like that. So we want to use the HTML entities function to convert any, say, script, things like tags or anything like that, so they're not renderable by the browser. So we would use HTML entities and wrap that like that. Obviously, this would only occur if that username has already been taken, but the point is that we're sanitizing this anyway. I mean, you might not even use it, because if you're sanitizing your data when you go into the database, then it doesn't really matter. So actually, let's leave it out for now. Okay, so I think we've looked enough at that. We'll leave the video as it is now. We'll go into the next part, obviously continue with these if statements, and we'll go ahead and we'll start to validate some more of this content. So I'll see you in the next part.